Well, I've talked about the book, and now is a good time to dive in. So let's dive in. So everyone, uh, I'm going to read a passage from the post-pandemic edition of Men Without Work by Nicholas Eberstadt. I stumbled upon Mr. Eberstadt and his book via the YouTube algorithm, and before I jump in, I just want to say that it seems that there are a whole bunch of not so good things coalescing in our country and around the world right now. Many of these things are not being talked about out in the open by the mainstream media, by our political class. Mike Rowe probably has been sounding the bell on this for a while through his Dirty Jobs TV show. And I don't know when Mr. Eberstadt started this work or when he started coming public with the work, but I think it's very fascinating because I've heard other parts of this in the digital spaces. That is the growing number of men without work and the growing number of men being unwilling to work. And I think that that's what I think that's what he's trying to say through this work, through this book, is that there's been a growing population of men who have lost their will to put on their hard hats and grab their lunch pails and go off to work every day. Uh, One of the logical next questions is, why is this occurring? I think that there are conversations about that all over YouTube and in other circles. But I think the big thing is this particular phenomenon is not being talked about society wide yet, but I think it's gaining steam along with a bunch of other things. So I'm going to read a passage from chapter 5. It's entitled, Who Is He? A Statistical Portrait of the Unworking American Man. Once again, I would like to interview Mr. Eberstadt. He is from the American Enterprising Institute. I don't know how much viewership that would get, but I think it's a very, very compelling topic, and it's I think it's an important piece of the thread of how our society has changed over the last 50 to 60 years. I think people in the 1950s and the 1960s might not recognize the United States today. Okay, so let me get to this passage. The long term unworking or not in the labor force, also known as NILF, men are the hard core of modern America's men without work problem. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, in 2015, an average of 7.2 million prime age men were NILFs. And the likelihood of being a prime age American man who neither works nor seeks work was 3.5 times greater in 2015 than 50 years earlier, parentheses 11.7% versus 3.3%. But broad trends in the odds of being an unworker are also apparent for the year 2015 in accordance with a prime age man's race or ethnicity, educational attainment, marital status, and family structure, and nativity, i.e., whether native born or foreign born. With respect to race and ethnicity, the greatest cleavage is between black men and all others, though differences among the huge and diverse non-black population are also evident. Hispanic men, for example, were more likely than average to be in a job and out of the NILF pool. The reverse is true for self-identified Native Americans. According to the United States race and ethnicity data, however, black males made up nearly twice as much of the prime-aged NILF population as prime-age job holders, 20.4% versus 10.6%. In addition, when Hispanic heritage is thrown into the mix, non-Latino blacks accounted for exactly twice as large a share of prime-age male NILFs as employees, 19.8% versus 9.9%. Once again, NILF stands for not in the labor force. Educational attainment, in turn, dramatically affected the odds that a prime-age male in 2015 would be holding down a job or living as an unworker. A prime-age man with at least some graduate education was 3 times more likely to be in the former rather than the latter category. Conversely, men without a high school diploma were more than twice as likely to be among the unworking. With every improvement in educational attainment, the odds of being in the workforce rise. By the same token, the chances of landing in the NILF pool increase the lower the educational attainment. Nevertheless, relatively educated men still accounted for a surprising share of the long-term jobless prime-age men not seeking work. In 2015, over 2/5 of the prime-age male unworkers had some college education, and 1/6 had at least a bachelor's degree. Marital status and family structure/living arrangements likewise prove powerful predictors. Married men accounted for 3/5 of prime-age job holders, but only about 1/3 of NILFs in 2015. On the other hand, men who have never married were underrepresented among the employed and overrepresented among NILFs. A similar pattern holds for prime-age men who were divorced, separated, or widowed. Living under the same roof with one or more children also increases the odds of being a worker, regardless of marital status, and married prime-age men with children accounted for over twice as much of the paid workforce as the NILF force. Finally, foreign-born men in 2015 were more likely to be job holders and decidedly less likely to be NILFs than the prime-age male population as a whole. Foreign-born males made up more than 1/5 of prime-age job holders in 2015, but less than 1/6 of the unworkers. In sum, an American man ages 25 to 54 was more likely to be an unworker in 2015 if he, 1, had no more than a high school diploma, 2, was not married and had no children or children who lived elsewhere, 3, was not an immigrant, or 4, was African American. I will examine the interaction between these factors in a moment. For now, however, I will explore how the role of these factors has changed during the long downward slide in prime-age male labor force participation rates, and how these appreciable changes have influenced this past half-century's male flight from work. Work rates and labor force participation rates both have slumped over the past half-century for prime-age men of virtually every ethnic group, educational level, and marital status. They have likewise fallen irrespective of family structure for as long as such CPS data have been collected in 1968. The only exceptions are foreign-born men. Their work rates and labor force participation rates actually rose between 1994 and 2015. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I thought that was an important snapshot of the book. I will probably jump around the book here on my channel. I'm almost done reading it. It's a short read, but it's very data intensive. So if you read this book, expect to see a lot of graphs and charts. And I'll probably have to go over this book one more time to absorb everything. And also, once again, I'm interested in talking to Mr. Eberstadt, and I will probably reach out to him to see if I can get a one-on-one. Of course, I'm a little fish, but again, I think this is something that a lot of people don't know about and aren't talking about. I think it's interesting being African American or black myself that my my peers of various ages, they, according to this, they make up a significant portion of these men who are not working and maybe have no desire to work. I think it gets interesting when if you ask why this is happening and how is this possible. Well, I think another thing that's not being discussed is the reading level of black boys in the United States. And it's said here in this book, if you don't go beyond a certain level of education, then you're going to be locked out of the labor force. So then the question goes back to, why can't these boys read? What's holding them back from attaining that proficiency? I imagine it's a very, very deep rabbit hole with some very uncomfortable answers, but ones that need to be investigated nonetheless. Before I end this, I was just thinking, before I read this passage, I remember, well, according to this book, this decline in male workforce participation, this has been going on for a while, and it's steadily continued to trend downwards over the years. I remember my father taking me to go see Gerald Albright, Will Downing, and Phil Perry, and the very lovely Vesta Williams, who passed away maybe about 10 or so years ago. And I remember the vivacious Vesta during her show. I think she was still single at the time, but one of her jokes on stage was she kept, for potential mates, one of her criteria was that he work. So I guess either that was for show, or already at that point, this was back in 1999, already at that point there were significant numbers of men not working. I'm going to read one other thing here. This is from the beginning of the book, and I think it sets the tone for the rest of it and why this is important for everybody. Because one could take the position that, well, who cares if these men aren't working? Leave them. Let them suffer. Let them be destitute and just leave them. Let them perish. But this passage suggests, this final blurb I'm going to read, and I'll probably read this every time I read a passage from this book, because I think it communicates that this could very well be a problem for everybody. I work. Most of the people that I know work, but this could end up being a problem for everybody. This reads as follows. The dysfunctions of our national economy are the backdrop to the ongoing deterioration in employment profiles of working prime age men. There were 63 million of these men at latest count. For all the post-war changes in America's manpower pool, prime age men still constitute the backbone of the U.S. labor force. What's more, it is during these same prime working ages that men typically form their families and raise their children, non-economic functions without which no society can persist. Plainly speaking, the United States cannot prosper unless its prime age men do. This is Big Discussions 76, my original channel. First of all, please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to the channel. If you want to donate something, that information is below in the description box. And you can also leave a super thanks. Please consider joining the Big Words LLC Newsletter. In addition to being a YouTube content creator, I'm also a writer with 2 blogs and a book project on the way. Everyone, look for more content, look for more passages from this important book. I will decide what to share as I go. And so stay tuned. So with that, as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude, and always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.